So Donald Trump has recently talked about tearing up the Iran nuclear deal. Now, this is basically going to be a full segment about the Iran nuclear deal and what it did. To make it short, the United States has had a really troubled history with Iran. We have talked about war and regime change in there several times over the past several years, and you can even find clips of Bush and Cheney talking about how we need to go in there and invade them and about how they have weapons and all that. In fact, I remember I even read an interview with Cheney where he directly told someone that he believed that his biggest regret as a VP was he didn't launch a dual war against Iraq and Iran. I like how I say Iraq, but I don't say Iran, I say Iran. Just makes you think. Anyway, back on topic. So, okay, Iran's a country we've had a very troubled history with. I'd also like to point out how Iran has never waged a offensive war in several years. In fact, I've seen some say it has been over 200. Now, granted, they have fought wars. They did fight in the Iraq-Iran war. However, there, it was Iraq directly trying to invade them. Now I'm saying Iraq, not Iraq. Not Iraq. Okay, but maybe you believe Iran could be a terrorist threat, which, in all fairness, it is a Middle Eastern country, and even though I do think there is a lot of paranoia about Iran, the geographical location it is sets it at a disadvantage by default. So, let's be fair, maybe you do believe that Iran could get its hands on a WMD. Or a nuke or something like that. Well, you see, that's why, during Obama's presidency, they made the Iran nuclear deal. It's very cleverly titled. It's the most straight-to-the-point title I've ever heard, just the Iran nuclear deal. It's a nuclear deal with Iran. Now what did the deal do? The deal made it so the IAEA could go into Iran and monitor them 24/7 to make sure when they're using, I believe, specifically uranium, but really anything that could be turned into a nuclear weapon or a WMD, that they are only using it for research and for their power grid. We would also, in return, lift previous sanctions on Iran and give them billions of dollars, which I've heard some sources say it's their own money anyway. However, I'm not entirely sure of that, so don't take my word for that one. Now, as someone who doesn't want Iran to have nukes, I am of course in favor of keeping this deal. Donald Trump and many people who are worried about Iran disagree, even though this would keep Iran from getting a nuke. And that's what brings us to today. So what would happen if we did get rid of the Iran deal? Worst case scenario, they get a nuke and we may need to go to war with them. However, that is a worst case scenario. I believe they do have things that could help them build a nuke. I'm not entirely sure if they could yet, though. However, they are on the track to, and that's why it's best to have the IAEA in there regulating them to make sure they don't. So getting rid of it would get rid of any incentive they currently have to not build a nuke against the United States. Because keep in mind, the United States has been especially harsh against Iran for several decades. I believe we committed regime change there at least once in the 50s, I think. Again, could be wrong on that, so don't quote me. But we have propagandized Iran for years as some kind of villain. Well, that is, except for that one brief time in the 80s when Reagan sold them weapons. And by the way, Reagan is a Republican hero. And it's like this joke I told some people the other day. You see, Obama can't give Iran back their own money, but if he were to sell them weapons, he'd be the greatest president ever. Just God. So, basically, getting rid of the Iran deal, I think, would be one of the worst mistakes this country has made if we want to remain a peaceful nation. If we want to create peace in the Middle East, which, may I remind you, isn't the whole reason we supposedly invaded Iraq because Hussein was one of the people keeping peace from the Middle East as possible? Well, that is after he supposedly did 9/11 and had chemical weapons and anthrax bombs, which he magically got rid of. Just saying, we still found 0 chemical weapons and anthrax bombs in all of Iraq. He did have rusty old chemical weapons, though, but nothing that could launch, and nothing that he could launch against the US. Okay, that's the end of the story. And I have a feeling that if we go to a war with Iran, at least now it will be kind of justified because they could build a nuke. However, I still think that doing it would be more of our fault than anyone else. But anyway, that's my whole thoughts on the Iran nuclear deal. I'm Ephrom, and good night.